Now, Professor Somnath Bhattacharya will sum up the entire session proceedings.
Namaskar. I am thankful to the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture authorities for giving me this chance of summing up, though the work is quite tough for me because I am the one, being a mechanical engineer, who is the most distantly placed from the theme of this seminar, and yet summing up is perhaps easy and not easy also at the same time, because I have to do justice in my own way to some 11 speakers in 20 minutes time. Swami Suparnanandaji Maharaj, in his address of welcome yesterday evening, mentioned, with the permission of Revered Maharaj, I will just mention the points. He said, to understand art, we should have some interest over and above gross material enjoyment. Secondly, art is the handiwork of a refined mind. Incidentally, he told one categorical statement that mind is not that physical, it is closer to Atman or consciousness. And he went on to say that aesthetics, which contains everything, art, culture, dance, etc., is associated with truth, beauty, and goodness. And he made two ends meet by saying that when one manifests the divinity within, he or she manifests all truth, beauty, and goodness. And in conclusion, he said that in future we look forward to seeing art imbued with spirituality. Sri Arun Ghosh then talked about the seminar proper, gave an overview of this seminar. And taking the name of Swamiji, he said that Swamiji's love for arts is well known to all, though, as has been pointed out in today's session also, Swamiji had no formal training, and he had to go out and learn to appreciate art all by himself during his wanderings in India and abroad. Sri Arun Ghosh pointed out very specifically that the very soul of the Asian is interwoven with art. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. This is Arun Ghosh quoting Swami Vivekananda talking to one of his childhood friends, Priyanath Singh, where Swamiji says, the very soul of the Asian is interwoven with art. Don't you know, he told his friend, don't you know that art is with us a part of religion? Their ideal, for Western ideal is utility, ours art. The Westerner looks for utility in everything, whereas with us, art is everywhere. Arun Babu also pointed out, referring to the famous story or parable of Sri Ramakrishna, that like Sri Ramakrishna talked about the pond and the four origins from which people were drawing water, and people of different origin are taking water from that pond, he correlated by saying the world of art also resembles an endless pond. Each artist in the world of art in all ages was and still is painting their canvases with their own particular brush, but all were dipping from the same source of spiritual awareness. This point to me was very nice and wonderful and powerful in its own way. Sri Ghosh also said that it is necessary to take a fresh look at some forms of new art that has emerged in the recent years. There are today numerous subcategories for types of art and art movements. And he told the example of Andy Warhol, which was self-explanatory. And in conclusion, Sri Ghosh says that art offers a way to genuine spirituality, and that all works of art has its roots in the fertile bed of spirituality. Yesterday's evening, the academic part of it had the keynote address of Swami Bhajananandaji Maharaj, who talked on spirituality and art, and reflecting on a very pertinent personal experience of his boyhood days and later on college days, he referred to the significant statement of Swamiji, who told Sister Nivedita, in quotations we are going, art, science, and religion are but three ways of expressing a single truth. Revered Maharaj said that this sentence is important, as is the next one, where Swamiji says, but in order to understand this, we must have the theory of Advaita. Revered Bhajananandji chalked out the meaning of the word spirituality, and as all of you will agree, that right up to now, via different speakers, we have had different notions of spirituality that are in vogue, and necessarily they are not of all the same frequency. Different schools of thought have been pointed out. Bhajananandji analytically told us that on one hand we have the Western concept, on the other hand the Eastern concept, and spiritual life is centered on the spirit, as the name goes. And what is spirit? In Western thought, this is dichotomous, the body and mind, and that's all. And therein lies its limitation. And Maharajji pointed out that the Western concept is vague and is not based on a true understanding of the ultimate reality, which leads us to the Eastern concept of the Indian tradition, where human personality is necessarily regarded as trichotomous, not only body and mind, but the concept of Atman is brought in significantly. Then he moved on to define art and the Western conception of art. Different points. He said, Plato's view, art is an imitation of nature. The second one, chronologically he went. The second one, Impressionism, then post-Impressionism through artists like Van Gogh and all, and the idea that art is an expression of the artist's feeling and creativity. Maharaj said that this last expression that I used, that the art is an expression of the artist's feeling and creativity, Maharajji said that it proceeded on two lines. On the one, we had abstract art, on the other, the theoretical part of it. Then he took the name of Freud and the birth of surrealism. Fourth trend, he pointed out, is the one where the locus of meaning of an artwork is identified in the viewer or reader. Fifth trend, in the Western lines, locates the meaning of art neither in the original intention of the artist nor in the viewer, but in the form of the artwork itself. He wraps up this part by saying that these schools are not mutually contradictory, and as per Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, they represent only different perspectives or realms of meaning. And he says that until the 18th century, Western art was focused mainly on religious themes, but with the intellectual movement in the 18th century, known as the Enlightenment, Western art became secular. And here, in passing, Maharajji told one line, which I underlined separately, where he says, everything that lifts the human mind above animal instincts and drives may be regarded as spiritual. Maybe one of the prominent outcomes of this seminar is embedded in this sentence. Then he talks about reality and values, the difference between reality and values, and says that Western philosophy has been predominantly a philosophy of values. In contrast, in Indian philosophy, the ultimate reality has been the chief concern right from its origin. So this is in contrast to the concept of values. And the central theme of this keynote address of Bhajananandji, as we have understood, lies in the following concept, where he says that the three ultimate values of Western philosophy, namely goodness, truth, and beauty, may be taken to be distant glimpses of Sat Chit Ananda. And on this screen, Maharajji projected with a nice drawing that Satchit Ananda, as seen through Maya, are respectively goodness, truth, and beauty. But as he has pointed out, that they may be taken to be distant glimpses of Satchit Ananda. Talking about the Indian conception of art, he has said that Indian conception of art is an expression of Ananda or joy. He has highlighted the third aspect, namely Ananda of Satchidananda, and given references from the Upanishads, particularly the Taittiriya. He talks about divine bliss as rasa, as identified in Indian tradition, and that in a way brings a conclusion to his keynote address, which says finally that all art is spiritual. And if we may repeat, he says that if all art is a manifestation of the Ananda aspect of Brahman, then we come to the conclusion that all art is spiritual. And repeating Swamiji's definitions of religion and education, revered Bhajananandji says after this deliberation that art is a manifestation of the perfection already in man, and goes on to say that art can very much be viewed as a yoga. And the future of art, since the seminar was to dwell upon the past, present, and future, on the future he says that the dominance of science and global spirituality, these two elements are going to reshape the whole concept, and perhaps spirituality will exert a profound influence on art in the future. In the last but one paragraph, he said, Swamiji said, "It is my opinion that Sri Ramakrishna was born to vivify all branches of art and culture in this country." After this illuminating lecture, we had that the presentation of Harsha Datta, editor of Desh, who said that what prompts an artist to create a belief within, perhaps, and that is what he termed as spiritual. And he dwelt in some length on the difference between spiritualism and religion, saying that spiritualism is not necessarily religion. Maybe another outcome of this seminar is the curious words spirituality and spiritualism, and what are their interconnections. So Harsha Datta was talking on these things, and he said, spirituality is one's character or quality that makes one rise above the barriers of worldliness, caste, creed, and sensuality, and realize one's connection with the truth. And he said that art becomes a spiritual process depending upon the degree of commitment that an artist brings to it. And in Indian art and architecture, Sri Harsha Datta gave different examples of mosques and temples, and said that the splendor of the spiritual is not difficult to locate. And in the end, he said, he talked about the difficulties in modern art, and he says that if the people of future look at art not in an utilitarian way, but as something which fills them with joy, sense of beauty, and the sublime, then he thinks that there will be that will be where the artistic and the spiritual will merge. We come to today's session, and which opened with Professor Taran Kumar Viswas, who said that in Indian art there are two distinct levels, the material and the spiritual or metaphysical, and as has been just now pointed out, that beautifully he chalked out the evolution of thoughts, where initially the images were highlighted, their geometry, their concreteness, but slowly things took a different turn, and the artists started looking inward somewhere in the Gupta age. And in the Gupta age, he talked with different examples how the look, the ambience started becoming quote unquote spiritual. And he talked in detail about the Bodhisattva, explained it, and he talked about religious architecture, galleries in Barbadur, where the four Jagats in ascending order took concrete shape in the form of architecture. And finally, he talked about Hinduism and the fantastic concept of time and space depicted through Hindu images and icons. Swami Madhuranandaji marked the very sentiment of his presentation by quoting words of Nivedita, who said that it's appreciation of art that is most important rather than the background from which you are coming, which has inspired Madhuranandaji and me too. So that is what he said, and then he said that more recently another forgotten characteristic of sacred art has been emphasized, the aesthete's experience. This is what he has said. His topic was understanding sacred art through different cultures and religions. And then he pointed out that to understand sacred art, things will be going wrong if we try to look at them from our age, our traditions, but they have to be seen with the time and tradition when the art was conceived with empathy. With empathy. So that is important. And there in this paper, he touched upon Taoism, Buddhism, Zen, Christianity and Islam, but not in much detail due to paucity of time. And he said that in Taoist painting, we have to be, one is in tune with the idea of an absolute principle underlying the universe called Tao, together with its yang and yin constituents. And the Taoist paintings in general, he said, invite the mind to